essay by William Clifford, The Ethics of Belief, and William James' response to that essay and his own lecture and eventually essay, The Will to Believe. Now, let's start with what Clifford talks about, okay? Now, Clifford opens up his essay, talking about a shipbuilder and a ship owner who basically has a ship that apparently needs to be refitted and overhauled, okay? Now, first he thinks he needs to put all his money into doing this. But the ship has been looking like this for a while, has crossed the ocean many times, many voyages, and she's always returned safely. So instead of kind of falling to his doubts, okay, he decides to put his trust in providence, okay, or faith, all right, that she's made it so many other times, she's definitely going to make it this time, though she clearly looks like she's not. So he lets the travelers travel across, maybe from England to America, and as they're all going looking for a new homeland, the ship sinks and it tells no tales, okay? He collects his insurance money, this type of thing. Now we ask, is he guilty for letting that ship cross? It sank, and it looked like it was going to sink. And of course we would say he's guilty for it. But what Clifford wants to get at is not guilty so much for because the people died, but the way he came to his belief. Okay? He says, let's change the situation. What happens if the voyage did make it, and the people all made it to America? Would it change the situation? And he says, not one jot, as he puts it, okay? He says, basically, what matters is the way he came to his belief. He said he had no right on believing on what evidence that was before him. And this is what Clifford wants to point out. He says, we only have a right to believe in something, okay, if there's evidence which supports it. In his mind, we'll see it's more like empirical evidence. If there is no evidence to support it, we have no right to believe. That's what he's claiming, which we see ideas then like faith, which is belief, okay, that has no evidence to support it, as what he thinks. You have no right to have faith, okay? You have no right to believe anything that does not have evidence to support it. And in fact, sufficient evidence, not just any evidence, okay? And that leads to his main, basically his main maxim here, all right? It's wrong always, everywhere, and for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. If there's no evidence, no matter who you are, what it is, or what you're talking about, you have no right to believe it. I.e., faith is something you have no right to have, okay? Now, somebody asks, well, what's the big deal if I just believe it, okay? If I just believe it, you know, it's not a big deal, right? I can believe anything I want. Why don't I have that right? And he says, one thing is, you may just think you have a belief and you're going to keep it yourself, but that's not really the case. And he has these couple different reasons of why beliefs, just on their own, even though you say it's not going to harm anyone, he said actually do. He said the first thing he points out is, you know, why is it a problem? He says, well, all beliefs are part of a web of beliefs. So let's say I believe in something like the moon is made out of cheese, okay? Well, that's correct, and maybe I'm just going to keep that, and I'll never have a chance to tell anyone, maybe, okay? But he says that's not the only kind of crazy or kooky belief I'll have. If I'm likely to believe this type of thing, that belief is connected to other things, then what else do I think the universe is made out of? What do I think we're made out of? If I'm likely to believe something like that, it's connected with a web of all types of other beliefs that could also just be as crazy, and those can spread to other beliefs and other beliefs, things like this. Another one is there's no belief that's not in a tradition. Okay? Yes, you say you're going to keep it yourself, but you more mean that I'm going to keep it and I'll tell those who are close to me, or I'll tell my children what I feel. Hey, it's my family, I can tell them what I want. But then they take it, and then they believe in it, and then they tell someone else, and they tell someone else. And eventually, and he says this, we end up spreading these beliefs, these false beliefs, these beliefs we have no right to have, like a plague. And he begins using very religious language when you start to see that he hasn't said anything about religion in the essay as to yet, but he's getting to his point. He's talking about religion, okay? And so he's saying what we're doing is allowing these beliefs to spread like a plague. And what they do is called a disservice, and they're a sin against humanity. Okay? He actually calls us, if we allow these beliefs to go, what ends up happening, we sink back into savagery. And he says it's not so much that we should believe false things, but that we should allow us to become credulous people. It's that we would allow beliefs like this to spread. And if I'm allowed to believe something like this, that's about the moon made out of cheese, and I should be, the other person should be allowed to believe this, and I should be allowed to believe that, and I'll believe this, and believe the other thing else, and believe all these false things, just because we don't have to inquire into evidence anymore. If we don't have to inquire into evidence, then why worry about anything? We can believe anything we want. And if we were to do this, humanity would degress. The only way we can progress if we put our trust, okay, in the evidence. So get evidence to support it. Take that painstaking, measures to try to improve things, okay? A real sense of power comes from actually proving them, not just believing in it. And if we don't do this, we will sink back into savagery, as he says, spreading these. And he says, you know, it's not that we should become thieves, but a den of thieves, okay? It's not that we should become just to believe in credulous things, but we should become incredulous people, all right? That is what he's worrying about. And so he thinks this is absolutely true. It's wrong always, everywhere, and for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. If you have no evidence, you say, I don't know. You do never, and you never have a right to say that I can have faith in this or the other. Okay? And obviously, he's specifically really wanted to target ideas like religion and how these beliefs spread. He thinks they are a sin against humanity, a pestilence or plague, which we are spreading. Okay? Now, he's got some good points, but now we got to talk about the other side. Let's talk about William James. And in a lecture he gave, I believe in 1896, to the Princeton and Brown philosophy clubs, he was giving a lecture there for him, and what he was doing was taking on Clifford's idea of this, it's wrong always, everywhere, for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence, that we have no time to believe, as Clifford would say, if there's no evidence to support it. What James wants to do is actually counter that. And he says, basically, James, or Clifford, is right for the most part, but except when it comes to genuine options. Okay, he says we should follow Clifford's belief when it comes to certain things, okay? Maybe certain things that can be proven, things like this, okay? But there are certain things that we cannot wait for intellectual proof or sufficient evidence before we have to make a claim about it. And those genuine options, those are genuine beliefs, okay? Those are the ones where maybe faith is something that is intellectually respectable, okay? And so what he's pointing out is a genuine belief, he says, is one that's living for the person, forced and momentous. And what we mean by this, living or dead, for example, a living option or belief for somebody would be something that you're likely to believe in. For example, Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior is a dead option to someone who is probably Islamic, okay? But someone who's Christian is probably a living one, okay? So if it's living, if it's something I'm likely to believe in, okay? If it's forced upon me, if it's a disjunct, and so that means, think of this for example, is this forced upon me? It's raining outside right now. I have an umbrella, or I could run to my car, okay? Can I run it, am I forced to either take my umbrella and run outside with it over me, or just to run directly to my car? Is that something I'm forced if I have those two choices? Well, there's more than just two choices. I could also just stay here right now, or I could put on a raincoat. There's more. It's not forced on me to pick this or that. A forced option is one in which I have to do one or the other. I'm either in the room, or I'm out of the room. If I'm in the room, I'm not out of the room. If I'm out of the room, I'm not in the room. Something like this. Or, is there God or no God? If I say there's God, then there's God. If I say there's no God, there's no God. Okay? Something like this. Things that if you take one side, you're not on the other. You take the other one, you're not on the other. Disjunctive is what he's talking about. So something that I would likely to believe in, something that's forced upon me, where I have to make a choice if either I'm doing it or not. Okay? And then something that's momentous. And what he means by this is it's not trivial. That it's not something that doesn't mean anything. Like tonight, what I'm going to eat for dinner, though I may only have two things in the fridge, I have to eat one or the other, it's not really that important in my life. Something momentous would be life-changing, something that affects me down to my core and perhaps maybe even shapes me as a human being. When we have a living, forced, and momentous, or as he calls it, a genuine belief, that's when perhaps, okay, that we could use faith, or we have a right to believe in what we want. Now there's one other thing we have to add. It has to be a genuine belief or option that cannot be proven on logical proofs, that's there, or intellectual grounds. Okay, when a genuine option cannot be proven on logical proofs or intellectual grounds, then it must be decided on passional grounds. So if there is no evidence or logical proof, no empirical evidence to say this is the case or this is the case, then I have a right, according to William James. He did say he'd rather call his essay the right to believe instead of the will to believe, but I have a right to believe on whatever grounds I want, on passional. If I feel that this is what I believe in, then I have a right, if it's a genuine option and it cannot be proven this way or this way, by logical proofs or intellectual grounds. Okay? And so what he's trying to point out is, like, I have a right to do it. All right? Now, what is Clifford trying to say to this? He says, well, whenever we're in a situation like that, you don't have a right to believe on passional ground. If we meet a genuine option that cannot be proven one way or the other, then we must accept and just say, we don't know. We can't say anything about it. Now, this is what James wants to be an argument against Clifford. Okay? He says, well, there's two principles of would-be knowers. Okay? Things that people who desire to know things are curious about. One of their main principles they keep is we must avoid error. We don't want to fall into error when we're trying to know things. That's a really important thing. He says, then there's another thing, though, is that we're seeking the truth. We want to be in the truth or to know the truth. Okay? Now, some may say that these are two principles of the same idea, but James wants to point out these are two different kind of axioms that you can be one or the other. It doesn't mean that one should be more than the other, but you could be more of a seeker of truth, or more of a avoider of error, or maybe mix some of those two together, okay? But these are not two ideas of the same thing. They are two separate ways of thinking. And he asked us, and he really wants to put us down to, he's like, how would you rather be, okay? Do you want to be someone like, so you want to do this, do you want to be someone like Clifford, okay, who seems to be obsessed with avoiding error, does not want to ever have a chance of avoiding error of, oh, if there's a chance that the evidence is not there, you know what, you don't say anything about it, you just go, I don't know. It says, you can be that way and put seeking truth as secondary. I first avoid error, and then if I find the truth, maybe it's okay. But then there's other people, he says, we could be seekers of the truth and put avoidance of error second, which James says that's how he is. He says, now, we must remember, he's not saying that we always seek the truth and avoid error always. When it comes to a genuine option that can only be decided on passional grounds, okay? When it comes to that, James claims we should be seekers of the truth and put avoidance of error as second. Just think about what would you rather be. You know, he talks about Clifford of always like, oh, I don't want to fall in the error. Oh, I'm nervous about this. He says this scientific nervousness that's pervasive in Clifford and other people of so worried that they might be wrong. They're so in fear of being a dupe. Okay, they don't want to become a dupe, so they don't believe in anything that can't be sure. Okay, but James says I can imagine many things worse than being a dupe. Okay, and he says I'd rather much be a dupe through hope than a dupe through fear. Alright? And he basically points out when it comes to these genuine options that are important to the human being, momentous, okay? He says, what would you rather do? He says, to be someone like Clifford is like being a general who says, well, we're not sure if we're going to win this battle, and so just because I'm not sure, I'm not going to even go into the battle at all. I'll keep my troops off the field, okay? So it's better to keep your troops off the field than risking a single wound. What would you rather be? And James keeps repeating, I'd rather be fooled through hope than fooled through fear, okay? Going for the thing instead of not going for it. That seems to be what he says. When it comes to genuine options, once again, we're not talking about jumping off a cliff here. We're talking about other things, okay? Living for some momentous ideas, which we have a few examples of. The ones he gives is saying, here are some places where you have a right to decide on passional grounds. And before I want to do that, I also want to make a kind of very funny argument James gives to Clifford. He says, you know, Clifford, his faith in it, I mean, he doesn't use the exact words, but his faith in the idea that avoidance of error should be primary, he says, he is quite passionate about. But the funny thing is, there's no evidence, sufficient evidence to say you should be this way or this way. You know, truth may come through affirmation, all right? There's no evidence to say one or the other, and so Clifford, he says, is a very passionate person. He really believes that this is how we should be, but he can't prove that on intellectual or logical grounds, okay? And so he must be doing on passional grounds. He has a lot of faith that we should avoid error. Now, that's fine for him, but James says, do you really want to do that? And this is where he's kind of comparing it to Pascal's argument, okay, Pascal's wager. How would you rather be? Would you rather, once again, be a dupe through fear or a dupe through hope? Okay? Would you want to take that risk? Go out there and take the leap and maybe be in the truth, or risk being wrong, or stay here as Clifford and never take the risk? What would you rather do? Okay? Now, here are some examples where he says, we have no time to wait for evidence, or you will never have evidence for it. One place is immorality. And this is one thing that is true. You can have all the empirical evidence you want, intellectual evidence to say that this is what happened at this time, I shot this person, and the bullet went through at that moment, on and on and on. But what science and what empirical and logical evidence will never give you is the ought. It will tell you what is. Take a look at our lecture on Hume. But it will not tell you what it ought to be. Is this right or is this wrong? Those things come from our passions. What do we feel? And if you study ethics enough, you will see there is no solid way to ever determine this, or intellectual way that this is right over that. It has to come from what Pascal says we must look to our hearts, okay? And so when it comes to, is this right or wrong, I don't have time to wait for scientific proof. There isn't any. I still have to decide whether it's something right or wrong. We do it. We can't just say, well, we don't know, so we don't make judgments. We make judgments every single day, and we have to keep doing it. Even Clifford is making a judgment, a moral judgment, in his essay, and there is no logical proof for that, okay? So morality is a place we need to do this. Another place is love, and I have this nice word from Terra del Fuego, the language of Terra del Fuego, says, Mami lapi nada pai. And James doesn't use it, but that's what he seems to be talking about. And think of in love, when you're, like for me, if you're in love with a woman or something like this, okay? Or if you're in love with a man, and depending on who you love, okay? You love this person, but you've been hanging out with them in a while, but you feel that they may feel the same way, but you never say anything between the two, and you're looking at each other, and you kind of, you know that they're thinking the same thing, but maybe you're too nervous to say anything about it, okay? That's mami lapi nada pai. It's having kind of knowledge of something that we don't say. It's unspoken. Many times love is that way of, I like you, you like me, but I never say anything because it's kind of, we're nervous about it. What James says here is love is that place where you have to take that faith. You know, if you sat on the sidelines and waited till you had 100% certainty that this person was in love with you before you said anything, how many people would you missed out on and being with and having a chance of love with? You have to hope that they meet you halfway. You have to take that leap and trust that maybe they do like me, even though the evidence will never show it until I go ahead and do it. So love is a place. I always, when I read this, it always reminds me of myself. Okay? And then finally, of course, religion is a place when it comes to does God exist or not? Are the eternal things the most important or not? This is something that cannot be decided on intellectual grounds. As much arguments as you want to see, take a look at our lectures on religion and proving God. There's no way to prove him or not prove him. It's something that you just can't do. And so this is something that can be living force and momentous force. Would you rather believe in something like that or not? It's up to you. But what James is saying, there's nothing wrong if you take that leap and believe in it. Or also, if you're an atheist, remember, take that leap and say there is no God. There takes just as much faith to say there is no God as that there is a God. Okay? And it takes, as he says, what would you, that's not even what Clifford's saying. Remember, Clifford's telling you to be on the fence. Say, I don't know, I don't know. Is that what you really want to be? I think what James is saying, take that leap and actually take a risk. Take a risk in what you say. Be the atheist or be the theist. Don't be the agnostic when it comes to this. Take that leap. What do you truly believe? What does your passion tell you? I think you would be doing yourself a favor. So in religion is another place this happens. And I'm going to let you guys decide what you think. You might be able to get what I think or what I feel siding more with, but these are the two sides of it. Now to finish today, though, I want to leave us with a quote by James that he's giving by James Stevens, okay? A poet. And he ends his lecture with this, okay? And I think this really sums up what James is trying to say, and maybe can also sum up what Clifford over here is trying to say. And this is what James Stevens, the quote that James brings up at the very end of his essay. He says, "We stand on the mountain pass in the midst of whirling snow and blinding mist, through which we get glimpses now and then of paths which may be deceptive. If we stand still, we shall be frozen to death. If we take the wrong road, we shall be dashed to pieces." Okay? "We do not certainly know whether there is any right one. What must we do? Be strong and of good courage. Act for the best, hope for the best, and take what comes. If death ends all, we cannot meet death better." James Stevens, okay? And what he seems to mean there is, you're in a tent, imagine, and you're on the side of this mountain cliff, and it's freezing. If you stay still and sit in this tent, you will freeze to death. But if you walk out there in that blinding snow, you may fall off a cliff, or you may make your way back. What would you rather do? Do you sit there and freeze to death and do nothing? Or do you take that leap and take the chance? What are you better off? That's what James is asking. Okay, so that finishes the lecture for today. I'll see you guys next time on my philosophical lecture shorts. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me. Thank you.